Hi, good evening. This time I would like to talk about the human lifespan. You may have heard the phrase 100-year life period on social networking sites and TV. In Japan, for example, there is a system whereby people who reach 100 years of age are given an award by the government. In other words, it will not be unusual to live for 100 years. However, we need to think a little bit about whether it can really be 100 years in terms of the content of life, even if we say it will be 100 years in terms of time. For example, 1 out of every 2 people walking down the street will get cancer and die in the hospital. That is, 1 out of every 2 people will be confined to a hospital for a few hours or years before they die. Our life expectancy continues to increase. But as our time is extended, we are being exploited for something else. It may be a disease or a job. While too many people spend their lives blindly, we are constantly moving toward death, 1 second at a time. In this issue, I would like to talk about the weight of such a lifespan. Going back 100 years ago, you may have heard this story before. Back then, the average life expectancy was 43 years for both men and women. It is hard to imagine nowadays, but it could be said that life expectancy was 43 years, which is only half of the current life expectancy. When we take the train, go to school, or go shopping at the supermarket, most of the people there are over 45 years old. Why was life expectancy only half of what it is today, only 100 years ago? The main reason was the extremely harsh living conditions. Mothers in those days were expected to have 5 or 6 children, and even if they had 5 children, 2 of them would die. Naturally, they spent their lives in grief, sometimes having trouble eating, sometimes suffering from illness, and sometimes struggling to survive as they watched their children die. Of course, they washed their clothes with a washboard and reused baby diapers. Rice was cooked in a kamado, which was a small stove-like structure. That was the way of life 100 years ago, and in a sense, it is probably inevitable that life is short. The same is true for men. Many men were mostly farmers. They worked from morning till night, swinging hoes to cultivate land. Their bodies were exhausted from the continuous physical labor, their backs were sore, and they died at the age of 43. What I want to convey to you in this story is that the growth of the past 100 years is not only due to the progress of medicine, but rather medicine is only one part of the story. Just as athletes live short lives, people who overworked their bodies 100 years ago also lived short lives. As an aside, if we were born 100 years ago, women would have been assigned the role of raising children and doing housework, and men would have been assigned the role of farming. But what roles are assigned to us today? What do you think? When people think about life today, they often use the old ways of thinking. However, this does not necessarily apply to the present day. For example, in Greek and Roman times, the average life expectancy was 25 years old. Jesus Christ, who was born at this time, explained in various scriptures what life is and how to live it. But if we break it down a bit more, we can ask, what is life at an average life expectancy of 25? How should we spend our lives when we have an average life expectancy of 25? The Bible is a story about how life is supposed to be lived when the average life expectancy is 25 years, which may not be entirely accurate when applied to today's world. Religion, for example, assumes that we will die, that we will have children, that we will starve, or that we will be sick. Philosophy, history, and even literature change, depending on the environment of the time. Based on these short and very intense lives, the average life expectancy exceeded 50 years in the late 1900s. The average life expectancy exceeded 80 years in 2000, and the average life expectancy exceeded 100 years in 2020. In the 100-year life period, there will be a frightening time and a sad gap between the two. Look at your feet. Is there a future in the rail you are walking now?